Good evening, everyone. This is Nancy Lopez from SWE HQ office. Today's go-to webinar is the overview of SWE governance changes. Today presenting, we have Penny Wirsing and Dayna Johnson. Penny Wirsing is currently an environmental manager at the Torrance Refinery in Southern California, where she is responsible for ensuring the refinery compliance with state, local, and federal regulations. She has been in the oil and gas industry for almost 30 years and has held a number of positions related to the engineering and environment around the country. Penny earned her BS in Civil Engineering from Michigan State University and her MBA from the University of Washington. Throughout her career, Penny has mentored young women within her company, in the local community, and at colleges and universities. She received the Distinguished Alumni Award from the Michigan State University College of Civil Engineering in 2015 and was honored with a fellow of the Society of Women Engineers in 2007. She has served as the Society Treasurer and Director of Strategic Initiatives and is currently the Governance Task Force Chair. Dayna Johnson is the Senior Commercial Manager for GE Energy Connections, where she is responsible for leading proposal teams of up to 30 people. Dayna earned her BS in Civil Engineering and her Master's of Engineering Management from Vasco University. Dayna received the SWE Distinguished New Engineer Award in 2011. She has served at all levels in the Society, including currently serving as the Region H Senator and Governance Task Force member. She has previously served as the Section President, Region H Lieutenant Governor, and Awards and Recognitions Committee Chair. I'm so sorry. This webinar will be recorded and questions will be taken at the end. And Penny will be taking the floor.
Thank you, Nancy, and welcome everyone. The purpose of today's webinar is to review the progress on the governance changes and recommendations to date from the task force. This is very similar to the material that was reviewed with the Board of Directors and the Senators at SWE 16 in Philadelphia, with some updates since then. Dayna Johnson and I will be presenting, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. Please feel free to type them in on your screen as they arise, and then Nancy will share them with everyone at the end. Now it's not letting me change screens. I apologize. It was working earlier. Try this. There we go. Okay, my apologies. Here you see the FY17 task force members. As you can see, they bring a variety of experience and perspective to the discussions. And in addition, we've reached out to a number of folks on specific questions. Many of these task force members were involved in the sub-teams last year. So when you see an ST behind a title, that's from the FY16 sub-team. And so what those sub-teams did was take a deep dive into these specific areas, regions, Senate, bylaw, etc. This year's focus is to bring all of that prior work together and formulate a coordinated set of recommendations for ultimate approval and implementation. It's important to remember why these governance changes are being pursued. Based on a lot of input and feedback, we've learned that some basic changes to SWE structure are necessary. It's the same thing that many other professional organizations are facing. The world is changing, and what got us here, it won't get us there. So we recognize that we really need to focus on creating more meaningful SWE leadership opportunities. I mean, people join SWE for very specific reasons, and one of those is to get meaningful leadership opportunities. Feedback that we've received, led to the conclusion that some of our leadership opportunities were not seen as meaningful. We're also looking to remove the geographic boundaries, the geographic barriers, and dissolve the boundaries so that we can better serve our members wherever they are, and really align with how all of our members communicate today. There were some very good reasons why the regions were set up the way they were, but in today's day and age, those reasons just don't carry the same weight that they did at that time. We're also transitioning the work of the Senate to focus more on strategic planning. This is actually something that the Senate was originally designed to do, and they've kind of gotten a little more tactical in recent years, and we want to move them back to being the strategic body of the society. So we're really making that move in parallel with the dissolution of the regions, and then shifting some of the section support to other places. Headquarters will pick up some of the more administrative support. We locals, which were actually underway even before this discussion, will be taking on that. And then there are some committees that will be taking on a little more role as well. And you'll hear more about all of that in this webinar. So, as I mentioned, a lot of work has already been done on this. The website, governance.swe.org, contains a lot of documentation. You can view previous webinars and podcasts. There's a lot of reference material there. The task force this year has been busy gathering additional information and feedback and developing integrated implementation plans. Our goal is to have everything defined by the end of this fiscal year. Of course, there will still be work to be done in FY18, but the plans will be laid out and ready to hand off by the end of FY17. Here you see a high-level overview of some of the different areas and timing, and we'll be going through these areas in more detail in this webinar, but I wanted to give you just a snapshot so that you could see what it is that we're going to be talking about, and then I'll share this same slide at the end as an overview to recap. So that various regions or various areas that we're looking at are the Senate, the regions, the section, the various committees that will be supporting this, nominating committee, etc. And then you can see some of the timing, some things that already happened last fall at SWE16, and then what some of the key milestones are either at the end of this fiscal year, by next SWE17, etc. So we'll be talking about more of this, including timing and details during this webinar. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dayna to start talking about the Senate.
Thanks, Penny. So as Penny alluded to on the last slide, we're going to take a little deeper dive into each of those different topics that were outlined in the overview. Starting with the Senate, there's a number of things that we have currently already done that are out of the Senate scope. These were all completed at SWE16 in Philly. So the Senate voted on a number of different motions, and those motions moved these responsibilities mostly to the BOD, as they've outlined there. There's a number of things that will stay in the Senate. As Penny said, the original intent of the Senate was to be strategic. Voting on some of these bylaws and having that our main goal as a Senate is not strategic. So we're looking to make sure that what we currently call the SPA and the ASPR are in our strategic process for the Senate. The Senate will also be responsible for that 5-year strategic plan. What stays with the Senate as it is now are the strategic initiatives. We currently have the Strategic Initiatives Committee, which works on a variety of different initiatives that we've identified as being something that the society should be focusing on. We'll also still be making recommendations to the BOD on what those actions should be. We'll still have face-to-face meetings with the Senate, and it'll still be the Senate's responsibility to represent the membership. A little deeper dive here. We will be using the Senate, the existing leadership competency model to fill the Senate. The nominating committee will be doing that. One of the things that they will be highlighting, though, is trying to find people with a strategic planning background or that skill set that can help us really focus on making sure the Senate is a strategic body. The composition of the Senate will be a little similar in size to what we have now. There will be 21 elected members, and there will be up to three appointed by the board. The board of directors will still keep their role as non-voting members. And currently, the way we've got this outlined, the 21 elected members will be made up of having 7 elected per year, and they will fill a 3-year term. But as I alluded to, the nominating committee will vet those candidates and make sure that we're getting a well-rounded group of people that can represent the extent of our membership, including globally, collegiate members, and whatnot. So looking at the schedule for the Senate, we're hoping by the end of this year that the transition will be to start pushing for the strategic planning process to fall into the Senate. So we'll be moving all of that over to the scope of the Senate. We will also work on having the governance transition plan approved. By SWE 17 in Austin next fall, we are going to have that transition logistical plan in place, and there'll be also a vote on bylaws that will come from all of the governance plan changes that we've looked at and approved so far. Surely there's going to be a large number of bylaws changes that need to be made. And then by the end of next fiscal year, we'll be working to evaluate where the bylaws responsibilities as far as approving changes will lie, and we'll officially transition the Senate to the new full-blown strategic body.
Thank you, Dayna. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the regions. As you can imagine, regions been a major focus area for both the sub-teams and the task force. Last year's sub-team took a really good look at all of the things that the regions do and what should be continued, what could be better done elsewhere, and what just wasn't adding any value and can be discontinued. Of those things that will continue, here's an overview of where that responsibility will reside. Headquarters will have a role in some of the more administrative issues, leadership reporting, financial reporting, some of the nagging that regions had to do in the past with sections to follow up on issues. Those kinds of things can really be handled by headquarters. There are a number of things that will be handled by committees, and what you see here is section support committees. We're still working through exactly what that's going to look like, but they're definitely going to be focusing on section vitality, section membership, helping the sections do what they do well. And so we have a couple different concepts that we're looking at. You'll hear about that in a couple of slides. We also heard a very strong desire to retain the leadership summits. Still not quite clear where that's going to land. It may be under these section support committees, but something for the new incoming officers to be able to get some training and networking and just know who to talk to going forward. We Local, as we mentioned, that was already underway before the governance changes began, but that will be replacing the regional conferences that are currently handled by the region structure, and also include probably some smaller scale section and individual awards that are currently handled by regions. Some of the other things that are being handled, as you can imagine, nominating committee and some other groups select their membership based on geographic representation. So we need to work through just what that's going to look like, how those members are going to be selected. The bylaws committee will be managing the bylaws updates. The awards committee will be, handling awards. So there are a lot of other little things that are going on in the background. The region finances are, they're all being tasked this year with developing a plan, their own plan for their own region finances to disperse those funds consistent with SWE's mission. So that is part of the flow. As far as schedule, here's an overview. The ultimate goal is to have the regions the region structure be gone by the end of FY18. So by the end of this year, each region has to have a plan for dissolving their finances, hold their last region conferences, help us determine what that Leadership Summit future state is going to look like. And then the region governors will be elected, but they will be serving a one-year term. The task force is actually looking at a number of different leadership positions that will need transition plans for those interim positions, like the region governors. By SWE 17, we'll be able to really take a deep dive with the current region folks and help them understand what exactly it's going to look like going forward, and all of that section support begins to transition to the committees and to headquarters. By the end of FY18, the region's structure will dissolve and their financial handoff needs to be completed. And then, to wrap up the details, by SWE 18, the regions will need to close out their websites, their social media, complete their reports and taxes, and just wrap up all the loose ends. And I will hand it back to Dayna for sections.
Great, thanks, Penny. You might think, based on some of what we have been talking about for the last handful of minutes here, that sections are going to pick up a large number of changes throughout all of this. But it might surprise you, it's not quite as crazy as you might be thinking. Obviously, one of the first things, the section representative position is not going to be needed. There's no region for them to represent back and forth with. We've talked about some, as a task force, if sections still want some sort of position, adding some sort of vice president position or something like that to help keep that conduit of information moving. That would be a similar role, but still a little bit different, still another way to create a position that might help your section's leadership pipeline. As we noted previously, bylaws are going to have to be updated. That includes section bylaws. And then one of the other things that we are moving forward with is simplifying section formation. In addition, that's going to be moving to headquarters. And part of what we're looking to do is take advantage of the affiliate structure that's currently being used outside of the U.S. And that really allows for some additional flexibility. Penny started talking about this section support committee. And part of what would fall into that is the LCC as we know it today. There would probably also be another aspect of it that would be a little bit more of a local representation, which would take on some stuff such as local geographic support. We envision that between We Local and this local geographic support, we would be able to still provide that section support, the face-to-face sort of contact that people still crave. In addition to that, we'll make sure through these committees that section leadership and membership are supported. And that includes stuff such as enhanced training and making sure that our leaders have the access to what they need to succeed. As far as the roles for this committee, we're still working through defining exactly what that entails. We've been working with the LCC and the Director of Professional Development, Through that, we're also looking to set up essentially a subject matter expert area, subject matter expert point of contact, and identifying the different subject matter areas that people might really need to contact as far as section support, whether it's membership, whether it's finance. The vision is having a number of these different SMEs located throughout the country so that we could have a point of contact that your section could reach out to. And then once they get in touch with that contact, they can get the answers to the questions they need. As far as different materials, one of the things that we have been working on does include enhanced training. There was enhanced training for committee chairs rolled out earlier this year. That's an ongoing effort by all parties. That's not going to change. We want to make sure that sections, committees, everybody have the training that they need to really succeed. As far as procedures, there's going to be a lot of documentation required to keep this up to date and to really make sure that we are documenting and capturing what works and what doesn't moving forward. High-level schedule. By the end of this year, the LCC has been tasked with determining what they think the required and desired SMEs are. We're also working, as I alluded to, determining that local support structure and finalizing that. And it sounds very up in the air, but there have been a number of conversations that have happened. So that is well underway. It's just hammering out the final details to make sure that it will all work with our plan. Also defining and drafting the competencies and procedures for the committee structures. By next fall, we're looking to make sure that the training tools are enhanced, and that's an ongoing effort with headquarters. I actually got a little bit of a sneak peek of some of the stuff that they're working on. So they've got fancier, newer tools to make sure that all of the training that we can provide is being done efficiently and effectively. We'll also be providing some additional in-person and virtual train-the-trainer programs, and the section support transition away from regions will begin by next fall. By the end of next fiscal year, we're looking to onboard more committee members to fill those SME roles. We'll also be working with finalizing the procedures associated with all of the new structures and then completing that transition of the section support away from regions.
Okay. Another area of focus is the nominating committee, and they have identified a number of administrative and logistics tasks to be handed off to headquarters so the committee can focus more on the vetting and slating of the candidates. In addition to the board positions that they're currently responsible for, as you saw earlier, the Senate will have 7 positions per year that need to be slated. And to address some concerns that were voiced about checks and balances, it's been proposed that the chairs of the standing committees will also be elected by membership. And those standing committees are ethics, bylaws, finance, nominating, and audit. So that will add to the nominating committee's plate. We have had discussions with them, and at this point they believe that the process they use can incorporate those additional positions, but obviously that's something that we'll keep a close eye on. And then in addition, the nominating committee has a number of other issues that they're working on. As I mentioned earlier, their committee members are currently selected based on geographic areas. Without the regions, that needs to be changed to really focus on competencies. They're also looking to improve some of their processes, like expanding feedback to candidates. And with all of this, all of these changes, an update to the election manual will be needed. In terms of schedule, the NOMCOM representatives being elected by the regions this fall will serve in 18 and 19, and then we'll have to work on that transition and you know, figure out the future member selection and chair selection process. So the call for nominating committee members will be going out in FY later this year in FY 18, along with the other call for committee members. And there's been a suggestion that we retain some of the past committee members in an advisory role for some period of time. So that's being looked at. A number of the things that are improvements to the process that aren't necessarily time critical in terms of the governance changes that we've been talking about are things like ensuring that the executive director has input into the process. I mean, the executive director is in a position to really understand the big picture of how SWE is working and where we're going in the future. So having that perspective available to the nominating committee is very important as they make decisions about future leaders. Also, you know, if elections are going to be contested or uncontested, how the petition process is being used, those are a number of things that are being looked at, not necessarily that need to be done in concurrence with every other change that we're making, but it's just a good time to, you know, take a clean sweep and make all of the improvements that that we can while we're at it.
As far as headquarters, we've identified a number of different things that they'll be taking on. So to kind of summarize that, one of the things that we're working with them on will be some of the logistical information and administrative work that happens during the vetting process for candidates for the nomination process. From a region perspective, there's going to be some coordination for the awards tied to We Local. The face-to-face We Local meetings currently, as Penny said, this change to We Local was before any of the governance discussion. So headquarters had already taken on the We Local scope. The section leadership rosters and financial reports, especially following up on those to ensure that sections are in good standing, and then facilitating the new sections and deactivating sections that are not in good standing and have no path to get there. From a section perspective, they'll help us with the affiliate and ambassador roles. Regarding the schedule details, obviously if you were in Philly, you did see that they have had quite a large number of new people join their staff, which is great. They are going to need a handful more to make this all happen. So they've been tasked to identify what additional staff they'll need and include that in their 3-year budget. And that goal for them is to happen by the winter meeting, which is the last weekend in January this year, this upcoming year. By WE 17, they will be hiring whatever additional staff they need for that first year, and then they're going to communicate to the members who is doing what. On a side note regarding that, they have heard that people are confused by who at headquarters is taking on what roles right now. So on their SWE website, there is a breakdown of, or at least they've started one, of who's covering what areas. And then by the end of fiscal year 18, they're going to be hiring the rest of the year 2 additional staff that they'll need.
So this is the overview that I shared earlier in the presentation, and just wanted to show it one more time so you can kind of see how all this fits together. As you can imagine, there is a lot of overlap, and a lot of things have to happen in a certain order in order to make it work. So hopefully you have a better grasp now of what these changes represent. It's easy to focus on all the work that's left to do, but I think it's really important to acknowledge all the work that's already been done. I mean, the motions that were approved in Philly, moving the policy statements and some other things to the Board of Directors. We've got the SWE locals already in place for the spring. The new section coordinator role has moved to headquarters, and the interest groups have been replaced with affiliates, more in line with our global perspective. All of the strategic planning is being absorbed by the Senate. They're in that process right now. And as I had mentioned, the nominating committee is implementing a number of the changes that, that were identified. So during the annual strategic plan review in late January, we'll be incorporating the financial impacts of these changes into the 3-year budget to the extent that we have them identified at that point. So here is just an overview of timing a little bit. We did use the opportunity at WE16 to socialize these ideas and gather feedback. We're holding a number of stakeholder calls over the last couple months and into January and February. This webinar is one of our opportunities to get the information out there and ask for feedback. We're really looking at the Winter Senate meeting as an opportunity to gain buy-in on the plan going forward and then finalize the implementation with those key groups. The expectation right now is that this task force is sunsetting at the end of this fiscal year, but we do realize that there's still a lot of work to be done even after June, and some of us may continue on to be involved just to ensure that there's a clear handoff and implementation for these steps. So with that, we are going to open it up to questions now. For those of you watching this as a recorded webinar, you're welcome to email questions to governance@SWE.org. That email comes directly to me and I respond to each one. And this webinar is being posted to the SWE website for future reference and so that each of you can share it with your sections and committees. So with that, I will turn it back over to Nancy, if you would let us know what kinds of questions have come in.
Yep, of course. This is the first question. In some areas today, the biggest gap is the sections knowing what resources are available to them and where to get the help. Is there a communication plan that will address this? Who will be reaching out to the sections to be the primary contact for them to ask questions to?
So communication has been an area that we hear over and over again that really needs to be addressed well in order for this to work. And there are a couple of different things that we can point to. One is that section support committee structure that Dayna mentioned. It's still a work in progress, but a big piece of that is having a local advocate or local contact available who is knowledgeable and plugged into where to go for answers. Another piece of that, I think, is the SWE headquarters website itself, which is being upgraded to identify the staff and what their areas of responsibility are. But there are a number of things that are in the pipeline, but absolutely understand that communication and knowing where to go for answers is going to be critical in making this work.
All right. The next question is there a plan for HQ to take on half the work the regions in fiscal year 18 so it is more incremental?
I believe that that's already in place. I would say that we locals were part of the work effort for regions, and headquarters started taking that on last year. If there is a specific issue that you have in mind, please do send an email to me at governance@SWE.org. But the work that the sub-team did last year, identifying all of the different tasks that the regions currently do, and then where does that best reside, has been shared with headquarters, and the items that have been assigned to headquarters they're aware of. To the extent that they need a transition period to pick that up, we'll be looking at what that transition looks like. But if there's something specific that you are concerned about, then please do send me an email so that I can make sure that that is clearly addressed.
All right, the next question is, who will the HQ staff actually report to? Who does the highest member of HQ staff actually report to right now?
Well, all of the staff report to the executive director, and the executive director reports to the board of directors, the elected board of directors. I don't know if that answers your question.
And I'd add that there's no plan that we've had to change that.
All right, I believe those are all the questions that are in right now.
So if you're listening and you have a question, I believe you can, I don't know if you can raise your hand or if you can just type in a question. And as I mentioned, please do send any other questions or suggestions to the governance@SWE.org. And please access the reference materials that are out there on governance.SWE.org. That might answer some of your questions as well. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, this webinar is being posted to the SWE website. Please do share it with your sections and your committees. And thank you for your participation.
Sorry, Penny and Dayna, we did have one more question come in.
Oh, okay.
With the Senate being a 3-year term, what is the plan to elect the new group?
That is part of the transition that needs to be worked through, and which of the members will be elected for a 2-year term and which will be elected for a 3-year term. It is part of the transition that needs to be worked through. And Dayna, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that?
Just that I believe that there's still somewhere a large Gantt chart outlining how that could happen. So it is being examined, looked at closely, and I think we'll be tying into the nominating committee to work with them to figure out how and when they'll be geared up for what level of workload as well.
I do not have.
But this year, the only thing I was going to add was this year, my understanding is this, the senator that gets elected this spring will still be serving a 2-year term.
All right, we do not have any more questions in the question box.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you everyone for participating. I appreciate it. Have a happy holiday, and we'll see you after the first of the year. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Dayna.
Thank you.
Thank you.